Hello, welcome back to yet another episode of your Re-Educated podcast. We are doing another one of my favorite types of episodes, the solo ones, the really hard, puts me on the spot episodes. I'm kind of excited though. I think in general, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with these episodes. I think I've also recorded like 3 or 4 of these in the last 2 months, so I feel every time it gets a little easier. It's just weird to hear your own voice out loud sometimes when you don't have the cover to hide behind other people's ideas. But I wanted to talk today about the conference that I went to, Kaleido in Switzerland. I'm really excited to share some of the amazing stories from that experience and a vision that I have for what I hope conferences will one day look like in the US, especially surrounding education and some of these other intellectual topics. But yeah, I'm recording this at 5 a.m. in the morning. I am so jet lagged and it's been terrible. I'm currently recording from Japan, but I have had some of the hardest experiences with jet lag over the last 3 weeks. So I was in New York for a bit and then I flew to Switzerland. So that's a 6-hour jump. And it took me about a week to get over that jet lag. And it was unfortunate because some of the days I was at the conference and I was going through it mentally, but I think the internal challenges really kind of manifested in beautiful conversations there. So in some ways, I'm very thankful for that. And then I just got accustomed to the Swiss time. Then I flew and came to Japan. And I'm dealing with, I believe it's 7-hour difference. So I'm dealing with that all over again. And it's been so tiring. It's been following the same pattern where I'm able to sleep for maybe 2 or 3 hours when I sleep. So I'll sleep around 10 or 11 or 12 and I'll be able to sleep until 3 or 2. And then I wake up and then I can't sleep until like 7 or 8. I feel like the first couple of days I was experiencing this when I was in Switzerland, I was really stressed out. I think it made it very clear to me how noisy my mind can be when I don't get the comfort and safety of sleep. I always have had a hard time, especially as of late, in the nighttime. I think until the sun is up, my mental health is so good. I feel like my self-talk and my monologue can be so positive. But then as soon as the sun goes down, all of a sudden I think it changes from night and day, and it's really fascinating. So I love sleeping for that reason, because I feel like I don't have to confront that version of myself. But I think perhaps maybe this jet lag in some ways is a call to action where I have to actually confront why my mind can be so noisy sometimes. So it's been a challenge, and I would say these last 2 weeks has made me have to really look deeply within myself to be like, what is it that I'm running away from in the daytime that makes me so afraid to confront myself at night? But it's been getting better. I would say today is one of the better days, even though it's only 5 a.m. and I've been up since I think 3. I'm excited to kind of channel all that angst and energy into this podcast, and I was writing up some notes and I'm excited to get into it. Let's do it. So I thought maybe today's conversation, we can start with a compare and contrast. So let's talk about what the typical conference looks like often in the States or other conferences that I've attended. It's cool. I think as you get to look back in time, it's nice to kind of remember all the different conferences that I've been able to attend, to cover for the podcast, whether it was in New Orleans or New York or the one that I went to in Italy or the few that I went to in DC. It's cool to kind of be able to pick and learn all these small little lessons from each one of these experiences. But typically, in my experience of a American conference, particularly that focuses on some intellectual concept rather than a spiritual conference, there is a group of panelists who are kind of the like high esteem, the higher class of people at these conferences. And then there's all the attendees, people who just go there to listen to them talk and learn and take all this information and go home with it. And so in this conventional setup, people can very much hide behind their particular labels. I'm the director of blah-de-blah-de-da. I'm the CEO of blah-de-da-de-da. I'm a professor at Stanford, so on and so forth. You can hide behind that because you only have to show up as that version of yourself. The conversations often will be about only that particular topic. So if you are an expert in, let's say, economics and you're speaking about that, then all the conversations you're talking to people will be about that. So you never actually have to remove the cover that you may not know a lot about most other things in the world outside your one area of expertise. And so there's also, as I mentioned earlier, this kind of hierarchy that exists between those who just attend the conference versus those who are presenting at the conference, because there's a clear difference. There's only, a small percent of people who are presenting, and then the large number of people in some ways may feel like they don't actually offer as much as the people who are sitting up on these panels or daises. I love that word, dais. And I think another thing is when it comes to networking, people often, because the conversations are, you only meet them for maybe a day or two, you get lunch, you have a few hours, your conversations also will sometimes be around the particular topic that you're talking about. And so, okay, what is your name? Where do you work? Do you offer value to me in my career? Yes or no? If yes, okay, let's keep talking. You don't? Okay, never mind, next person. All right, business card, business card, business card, business card. You get 50 business cards, you go home, you go, okay, well, I can add everyone on LinkedIn, but I don't really know anybody. And that begs the whole question of what does it really mean to know someone? But, I don't leave. I've met so many people at these conferences, I don't really think I'm still in touch with anyone, right? And I think often it's because of the setup of the hierarchy of how people go there, the intentionality behind why someone shows up. Someone goes to these conferences either because their company sent them, they have some utility to gain there, or they go there because they need some networking, they need a job. Or everyone goes with a very particular intention. And so they have a goal, they're going to get that goal, and anyone who doesn't help achieve that goal is kind of just on the outside. I don't really need to talk to you. I need to get my goal done. So I think what that can end up doing is people who may be younger or people who may not feel like they have that much to say about that one particular area of expertise may start to feel like, okay, well, maybe I don't really have much to offer. I'm not really valuable. Let me just come and listen as much as I can. Not taking into consideration that each person has such a unique set of experiences that to ever talk to someone like, oh, you're not actually that useful for what I need to do, does a huge disservice to actually understanding how everyone has something to offer if you can tap into what it is that they're particularly good at. So I feel like this is the typical conference in the States, lasts a couple days. You stay in a hotel somewhere, or you stay and you find your own housing, and you come into this one conference center and you spend some time there, and then you go back to your spaces. You might have one night where you go and get dinner together or go out together, and you make a few friends in the end. Now I want to compare it with Kaleido. If we go back, I think I should have this number on deck, but I don't, and I'm not going to look it up, but I think it was in the early 20s or 30s, episode maybe 27, I had gone to Italy for a conference called Cortona. That year, the focus was on consciousness. And one of the guys who went there, who also went to ETH in Zurich, also felt this sense that the conferences perhaps were too intellectual and were actually leaning more towards the conference that I had just described and wanted to build something else. His name is Naveen. We also had him on the show. And he built this thing called Kaleido. And this was the seventh rendition of the conference, and a phenomenal one. The theme for this year was peace and liberation, two very lofty topics. And I want to now offer the contrast of what these conferences, the kind of essence or the ethos of these conferences are. One of the fundamental principles, and I briefly touched on it earlier, is that each person, due to how unique just the human experience is, has a very integral perspective on these very important questions, whether you went to some established university or not. What it takes is the open space and the ability and patience to listen to someone to figure out what it is that you can learn or kind of pick up from different people's perspectives. So to build this space is actually really hard. One, you need a very diverse group of people to show up. That is hard to get. One, because you need to know diverse people, and two, because they need to all feel a desire to show up. And so the first thing you show up at one of these things is the international presence that shows up at these conferences are often mind-blowing to me. Just off the top of my head, And to be fair, one of the things people had said is that in Europe it's a lot easier to do, just because Germany is so close to Switzerland, which is so close to France, which all these countries are so close to each other. You can actually very easily get an international kind of audience or attendance just based on how close they are. It's the same thing as in the US. You might get people from Utah and you might get people from California, but we're a lot more similar and homogenous, so it doesn't give that same effect. But just in the time that I was there, I met people from Belgium, I met people from Poland, I met people from India, I met people from the States, I met people from Pakistan, I met people from, I believe, Eritrea. It was just so cool to kind of see how many places and people came from all over the world, which immediately offers a sense of diversity in the type of thoughts and the backgrounds that people came with. On top of that, now you throw in a diversity of profession. You had dancers, you had philosophers, you had, academics in different fields, and you had artists, and you had me, and you podcaster, and you had all these different people, and it was you added layers and layers. You had different age groups. You had people who were in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and you had a lot of people in their 30s, 40s, 50s. You had a baby. It was mind-blowing to see how diverse, before we even talk about anything else, just the playing field was. You actually had no idea what the person you were going to talk to's background was, and you couldn't even come close to predicting. So what does this do? What this does is automatically create a space of curiosity, because you're like, I actually don't know you at all, and your story could be anything, because I have no way to gauge, okay, everyone here probably went to the same university, everyone here probably did the same thing. No. You could be, I met somebody who does documentaries and does a phenomenal job. I met another person who does healing dancing, and I met another person who is a philosopher of ethics, and I met another amazing businesswoman, and another person who is Maori and brought an indigenous perspective. It was just so fascinating that you never know who you could talk to. So you come in with the sense of openness, being like, okay, we all have such different backgrounds that there is no way you can just minimize what someone has to say just because they didn't go to a university or whatever. More often than not, you may have never even heard their university, so you don't even know what judgment to place, right? As opposed to when everyone is part of the same culture, when you say something like, oh, I went to Stanford, or you say something, I went to Harvard, there's a certain value that comes with that. But if everyone's coming from different places and they don't really even know what that is, you can't really just hide behind, oh, okay, well, this should give me some sort of authority, so let me just say this to do that. And it works vice versa as well. So that's one of the diversity, I think, is such a integral part of what these conferences, and Kaleido in specific, has to offer. Second, you coexist. So I'm actually going to get into what a day-to-day looks like, but one of the things is, even the one in Italy and this one as well, we stayed in Haslibeck. I've been trying to work on my German accent. Also, I want to just say this. My entire exposure to the German language has only been through movies, Inglourious Bastards, of that sort. And so I never noticed how beautiful the German language actually sounds. And I feel like I've only heard it in a particular context. And most Americans probably know what that context is, and it has to do with World War II. But to actually hear it outside of that context, just normal people talking it, I'm like, wow, I think I've definitely consumed a lot of propaganda just about this culture. And I'm really excited I made a lot of German friends and tried my best to learn all the different slangs, and I fell in love with it. One random fact that I thought was so cool is the word iceberg comes directly from the German word Eisberg. I guess maybe I might be pronouncing it correctly, but that means mountain of ice, which is just so cool to me, because normally when words translate like that, you either change the spelling, or you take different parts of it and then combine it with other roots. The fact that you just straight up took the entire word, and then the only thing we did differently is pronounce it differently, it was just so cool to me. And it was kind of cool to just be like, dang, I had no idea that was the root of the word iceberg. But we were in the Alps, which was so cool. I was also just, we were at this hostel. We all lived in the hostel, and it was only us. And outside of where the main kind of meeting lawn was you could see the entire glaciers, and it was so beautiful, and the weather was perfect. It wasn't cold, but it wasn't hot. You could just feel the kind of mountain around you, the clean water, the fresh air, and I think the landscape was just perfect for the space to kind of also really be enriching. And so while you're in this space, you're coexisting with all the other people living there. So what does that mean? That professor, who probably is the biggest deal in the world, you might hear them snoring maybe in the room next to you, or maybe you might even be in the same room with you. You might watch the people, you see them eat, you see them shower, you see people just exist as humans. So what ends up happening? You're no longer the esteemed doctor who makes no mistakes in their life and is perfect. You become human. And that happens to everyone. Every single person has to see each other for what they are, which is a person. And what happens in this process, I think, which is really, really, really important, is the humility to accept that you may be good at one thing, but you are not good at everything. And someone else may not be good at the thing that you're good at, but they will be good at their own thing. And while this is obvious common sense, I think it's really unfortunate that in conferences, you don't actually get to see people's weaknesses. You only see people's strengths. I also have been clowned. I think I say it, I pronounce it incorrectly. I say strength, but I think it's strength. And I've been clowned for that a lot. It's a new thing that I've learned I need to pronounce differently. But you get to actually see people's weaknesses, which I think humanizes them. So there's no longer this hierarchy of, oh my God, you're an expert, you know everything. But you're like, okay, you have your strengths and your weaknesses, and so do I. And we all kind of bring our own set of strengths and weaknesses to the table. And so I think you're able to really, so there's two benefits to this. One benefit is that you see everyone as an equal. No matter what profession you are, how old you are, what you've done with your career, you see people as equal. The second one is that because you no longer are held to the expectation to be perfect, you can also live in your imperfections. You're able to come to the table with whatever it is that you're struggling with or having a hard time with in your life. It was fascinating to see people who were so put together, were presenting, maybe a little later, open up about grief that they were going through, about pain, someone, passing away, having a hard time with their health, having a hard time with their relationship, and it was like, whoa, the one thing that connects us all, no matter how rich or successful you are, is the fact that we all struggle and that we're all terrified of what happens when we die. Those two things, no matter who you are, is something that connects us all. And it makes the human experience actually that similar that your wealth and prestige and all that doesn't actually change that experience that much. I think that when this stuff is laid at the foundation of whatever it is you're talking about, the discussions are a million times more fruitful. The reason why is because ideas never stick. The emotion and the feelings that arise when you hear someone say something, that sticks. You hear all these great ideas, but whatever, you don't even know the person talking. They don't seem to even respect you. You'll be like, wow, that was profound. Write it down and forget it in like 1 month, in 1 week, in 5 days. But if you connect with the person who's speaking, and then when you have that conversation, it spurs this kind of deep level of meaning and passion that never leaves you. Whether it's something you can regurgitate or not is different, but that kind of impact that the relationship with someone can have an impact on you, that is something that sticks for a long time. And I think that's why, whether it's Cortona or Kaleido, I'm still going to stay in touch with so many of these people, and have. It's been 2 years since Cortona, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them. And so I think in these senses, the fact that you can live in your perspective, the fact that you see everyone as equal, and the fact that you can show up with your own struggles sets the foundation for how, once we started speaking about peace and liberation, it really deeply impacted. So now let's talk a little bit about what the day-to-day was like. So similar to the Cortona conference, the Cortona conference was actually, I think, 7 days. So that's a whole journey. This one was 5 days. So the first day, we got there. Everyone got to meet each other. We spent a lot of time. There was a lot of good music. A new genre that I've been hearing, which is an amazing genre, is this mix of Bollywood music and Afrobeats. And I was shocked with how awesome that genre was. I will try to find some of those songs, but they were really good. But, there was a lot of dancing, good food, a lot of talking. And then we just at night, got to set the foundation down. That's something I really liked that the person who ran the thing, Naveen, kind of did. The very first day when we all sat, we kind of got the time to sit and reflect and be like, what do we want from this experience? Why are we here? What is it that we're looking for? And I would say, I want to highlight, which is very different than what I had mentioned earlier when I talked about the conventional conference. Rather than just being like, what is it that you want materialistically? The question was posed in such a way where it made you really think about, like, what is really the point? I mean, outside of, yes, I want, obviously people want to do well in their career, want to develop themselves, so on and so forth. But what is it that you really want? And to kind of lay that intention down before we went on this adventure of these next 3-4 days. So that's how we started. The next 3 days, we started the morning with a morning circle, which is this really cool thing that I've never done before. But so we had breakfast first, which was awesome. Great breakfast. It was really fun to be in the kitchen out. I was volunteering as well. So I met this amazing person. His name was Sebastian. He's from Poland, and he is a professional chef and just such an energy and a great kind of human, and all the work that he would do. And anytime someone was tired of the intellectual stuff, they just go into the kitchen, and it was always a party or a vibe in there. I cut so much garlic one day that my hands smelled like garlic forever. And then I learned another cool trick. If you rub your hand on metal, it makes the garlic smell goes away, which, who knew? But we started every morning with this morning circle. Okay, I want to kind of share this as well. So I've run a few things on my own. I run a book club. I ran a silent retreat before. And I often forget how effective a single thing that you do can be on everyone's mood for the day. So, like, for example, in the morning circle, we'd often like get in a circle and we'd give like these like massages to the person in front of us, and then we'd turn around and do it to the person behind us. One of the days I was so stressed out from not sleeping at all, the morning circle changed my entire mood. Like the things that we did, how I felt, I was ready for the day. I felt so energized. We had one of the days, each day was kind of different in the morning circle. One of the days we called the circle a system. And then someone would ask a question like who in the system has been dealing with grief? And then everyone would walk in, whoever felt that, and then they would walk out. And then they would ask, positive questions like, who had a really, fun time last night, or whatever question it was. And people would, walk up, and it felt so beautiful to kind of get the gauge of what are other people feeling? What am I feeling? How are we connected? It gave this sense of unity, no matter what you were experiencing or going through in the conference, which I really liked. There was other like fun little activities and games, and it was a great way to just start the day. I mean, the same way as being a child. I mean, it's something I was thinking a lot about. I was like, I wonder if the kids who have PE in the morning do a lot better in school than the kids who have PE maybe at the end. Because I feel like simply moving your body, having human connection and beautiful conversation just like sparks your day in a way where everything else becomes so much easier. All the challenges that come after become so much easier, rather than doing that later or not doing it at all. So we'd start the morning with the morning circle. And then after that, we would have 2 lectures. So these lectures would be in the outside, we'd be in the grass, and they would, be about many different topics, about sustainability, we had one about like peace and indigenous kind of approaches to peace, or just international approaches to peace. We had one about like what sustainable economics looks like. It was cool. It was all types of different conversations. We had one where the person did like a Kaleido, I believe. That was really cool. And so after the lectures, which I have another point to make, but I'll talk about that later. After the 2 lectures, you'd have lunch, and then you had these workshops. So the workshops were fascinating. You get to pick. There's about 8 workshops and different people who led them. So the one that I went to was permaculture, and then there was another one that was about the economics, but there was ones you could do about music or drumming, or you can do intellectual stuff, and you can also do like straight activity-oriented things. And then after the workshops, you'd have some free time in the evening, and then you'd have dinner, and then we'd have like an event at night. Either it was dancing, or we had a music show, we had a bonfire, a bunch of activities at night, and then you fall asleep, and then the day starts again. So let's actually break some of these things down. 1, I feel from the lectures, I learned again. I'm really excited to maybe pursue my PhD, and I had forgotten what it was like to be in a classroom, because it's been about a year now since I left Georgetown. I remembered how hard it is for me to sit and listen to someone talk for a long time. I think I'm realizing now that that is just a form of learning that I think my brain is just not capable of doing. I really like the interview kind of format where anytime I don't understand something or I get bored, I can kind of shift. I'm a lot more in control of my learning than like someone else just generalizing learning for a large audience, even though there was only about maybe 50 or 60 of us at any given time. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that. There was about 80 people at this conference, 85, I believe. So, but you know, I tried to approach the lectures from a place where I was just like sitting back and allowing whatever the lecture gave to like just come into my brain, and not like be like, okay, I need to take notes, memorize as much as I can, because I was just like, this doesn't work for me. I'm going to just sit here and passively like listen and daydream or draw or whatever it is, and whatever sticks, and whatever doesn't. And I think for me, honestly, that I found that to be really helpful. But I know a lot of people found it really useful. I thought the conversation about the ethics of war to be really fascinating. We talked about pacifism, militarism, the differences, what is needed, what is peace really. I thought it was a fascinating conversation. I want to talk a little bit about the challenges I think I experienced throughout this conference, and so did many other people. So one really cool thing that I saw implemented here was something called an emotion circle. So we talk a little bit about it in our first episode. I'm excited to interview everyone from the conference. And so basically the emotion circle was this giant kind of drawing that they placed in like the center kind of where everyone met in the lobby. And there were a bunch of main level emotions like anger, for example, or joy. And then within each one, there's about like 3 sub emotions. So for anger, it might be fear, or for anger, it might be like, whatever, hatred. I don't know. I don't really remember the exact emotions on each. But they then placed a bunch of rocks. And at any point in the day, if you feel, you can walk up to the circle and take some rocks and place it, how you're feeling at that moment. I'm also right now, what just came to my mind is, I can imagine if I explained that to somebody, they'd be like, that sounds like what you would do in kindergarten or first grade. And yeah, it is. But you know what? It was actually such a joyful experience. The reason why is because when you check from day to day to day, you can actually get a gauge of how the whole group is feeling at any given time. It's actually a very deeply connective experience, because at any given moment, you can be like, oh man, I can actually feel how everyone is feeling at this particular time. So you never actually felt alone, regardless of what feeling you felt. And the reason I bring this up is because the conference was really challenging for everyone I've spoken to. It made you have to confront so many things that were challenging to deal with, that you had so many inner conflicts. You're like, I don't want to believe this, or I'm tired, I don't want to have these conversations. All your insecurities, everything comes up. And so I remember the very first day, people were kind of annoyed. People were like, this is really hard, and I don't really enjoy this. This is a mix of intellectual, spiritual. I don't really get what's going on. I'm confused. And I remember Naveen said something really interesting then. He told me, I was talking to him, and he told me something about like, I've learned to be patient. And he said something along the lines of, this is how Kaleido will be. He's like, I feel the tension, and I know this is the process of Kaleido. And at that point, I didn't really fully get what he was saying. But by the end of the conference, when everyone was leaving, and we had this beautiful ceremony at the end, and I saw everyone crying, and it felt everyone was moved very deeply by this experience. It made sense then that the hardship that you experience is what leads to the growth and the change, which is what leads to the joy at the end. If the whole thing was just joyful, we wouldn't have learned as much. It is through overcoming the hardship do you find deep wisdom within yourself of why did I feel that? And the joy comes from letting go of that, whatever it was that built up that anger or resentment. And so throughout this conference, I had a hard time. The jet lag was a part of it. I felt so much resistance to a lot of the things that was happening. I can maybe give a few examples. I wrote down a few of the things that I felt. I felt resistance, rejection, and a desire for attention. And I kind of want to break these three down. So to talk about resistance, so there were a lot of things that would happen that I personally have a really hard time with just like accepting. And I think there's something to explore. So for example, I've done ecstatic dance once. And when I was there, I just found it odd. And I was like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I'm typically quite an open-minded person, I would think. But I had a hard time just like, I didn't understand it. But I wasn't trying to understand. I wasn't trying to understand what is it about this that these people enjoy? Why do they feel the need to do this rather than dance with structure, dance on beat? Why do they want to roll on the floor and move their body in all these really free ways? I didn't get it. But the part that was the resistance is I didn't seem to care enough to try to understand. And so that happened a lot at this conference too. I mean, one of the nights, for example, this lovely woman, she's I think about 80, was planning a kind of event for the main day when we were throwing a party at night. And she had this idea where she was going to wear a horse mask and she was going to ask people to come to the circle and start dancing. And to me, when I heard the idea, it felt very, I don't know, it felt like something out of Midsummer or something. Like it felt, I was like, I've been to so many parties where people are dancing and everyone's just dancing. There's no kind of need to like bring someone into the circle and have the whole kind of seance type of feeling to it. But after I saw the actual implementation of it and how people really enjoyed it and people liked that feeling, I was like, why was I so closed-minded to this idea? It's okay to not like an idea. There's nothing wrong with that. But the part that is wrong to me is like, just because I don't like how something feels or the sound of something, to not be open enough to actually engage with the idea itself. That's how you create boundaries behind really understanding someone. You go, I don't agree with that person. They say they're anti-abortion. I don't even want to listen to them. Like they're just wrong. And it stops like a way to actually get into the mindset of the person who feels a certain way so that you can actually interact with them. So you can actually interact with difference. And that is absolutely essential in today's world. So there were a lot of themes and actions and things that were brought up that I felt a lot of resistance to. So that was one thing that I think it manifested very deeply in my sleep, being like, no, I have to sleep at this time. I'm not going to wake up. I hate jet lag. Like the resistance to just accepting what was the case, which was I can't sleep. The second one is rejection. And I feel a little, I guess, shy to kind of openly speak about this, but it was something I had felt 3 separate times. And I feel that it made me really connect with an experience that I had a lot as a child. And I felt a deep level of sadness and sympathy for younger Goutham for experiencing this feeling so many times and kind of not having the tools to properly process that feeling and to still feel loved. So I have had this thing from a young age where I have a very, what is the word? There's a whole word for it, but it's an attachment style, but it's very, I guess I latch on quite quickly to people, and I fall in love with people all the time, and just humans based on the things that they say. And I feel that when I do fall in love very quickly in that sense, I desire their attention or affection for a prolonged period of time, which is obviously impossible to do. Nobody is interesting, or just like humans aren't just capable of giving one person attention that quickly. And so what ends up happening often is I have these kind of lofty expectations for a person I meet, and then they don't meet it or whatever, and then all of a sudden I feel very rejected, and I immediately feel like, they don't like me, no one likes me. I have these like inner kind of monologue that happens. And I still remember to this day how many times I had that feeling when I was in the 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, because at that point I had no idea what my value was, and then that I was worthy of love and I was worthy of just affection. And so I feel like it really hit me so much back then. I think because I was in Switzerland, I was in a country I didn't know, I was around people I didn't really know, I was kind of seeking validation and just like affection for the sake of feeling safe a lot more. And so there were 3 different people that I had quickly fallen in love with and, responded in different ways. But there were so many amazing people at this conference that eventually when they would go on to find other amazing humans and lose themselves in conversation with them, I felt that feeling so strongly again of just, like, am I worthy of affection? And the reason I guess I wanted to share this was because it was so just cathartic in some ways to feel like I was a child again, to feel like I was in 10 or 11. And I felt that feeling of rejection when my crush for the longest time started liking someone else. Or it made me realize what it was that I was running away from for so long. That why is it that I am not capable of understanding that someone can love you and your presence and your moment and your time, and then also have that same experience with other people? Why is it that if someone experiences that with you, you have to somehow now corral it all into yourself and be like, it must be about me forever, right? To be like, I am capable of being loved, and I also want other people on this planet to also feel that love. I do not need to somehow be the dictator of all love in this planet. Is something that I think I had a really hard time with as a child, and it still carries over to today. And I think one of these beautiful things about the conference is I think everyone had something that they have confronted with, they have been confronted with during so many different points of their life that showed up at this conference. And who would think that a conference would do that? Who would think a conference would create the space where you actually have to confront these emotions? Because the difference is I didn't have to run away from those emotions at this conference. I didn't have to experience them and be like, all right, push it away. I need to be perfect. Because it was so long and there was so much time and space to think and reflect, I was able to feel those emotions and sit on them. Okay, well, I'm feeling rejected. I'm feeling unloved. What can I do about this emotion? Why do I feel this? Do I feel connected to it in any way, right? And I think in that sense, rejection played a really big role for what I learned from this conference, and a huge kind of challenge that existed for me. And this connects to kind of the third point that I said, but a desire for attention, right? Wanting people to have their eyes on me, wanting people to kind of validate me in some way or another. I think this showed up again as well in different ways where I felt like, okay, well, I want to be seen. I want to be kind of validated for the things that I do. But again, I think it ties in very deeply to this feeling of rejection or feeling unworthy of affection. We've moved quite far away from education, but I bring up both of these points to just say that I think a conference that is deeply moving cannot only be about the intellectual. The intellectual stuff is important, no doubt. But I mean, it's just intellectual stuff. I mean, okay, yeah, I've become an expert in peace and liberation. Cool. But if I have not liberated myself from my own sufferings, from my own insecurities, I mean, what is the point about being an expert in all the theories of liberation? There's no point. The intellectual cannot be separated from we can use the word spiritual, but what I'm trying to say is more of like the internal experience of existence. The intellectual is kind of the understanding of the things around us, the space, the atoms, all these things around us. But there is an internal experience of life that cannot be easily explained just by some theory somewhere. And the best conferences, I think, to help you develop in both. And we talked a lot about this because I had brought up the question of why do you center this around an intellectual topic? What if it just became a pure, find your inner child again or whatnot? And the thing is that then you don't get that unique kind of grouping of people who may need it the most, where you have these typical conferences where it's only intellectual, or you have these spiritual conferences where it's only, or spiritual retreats or whatnot, where it's just spiritual. Why is it that we can't do both? Are we missing out a huge part of the conversation because we can't find the intersection between these two? And I 100% think so. When it comes to things like peace and liberation, we can intellectualize it all we want, but it has to be something that is also experienced. And this is the same for anything. It doesn't just have to be these lofty conversations. I mean, even when we talked about consciousness, which was very scientific, there is an experience of consciousness that is also important, right? And I think like a lot of these topics, there are parts of it that has to do with who you are and how you connect to it. So when we talk about education, it's not just some abstract concept of, oh, I have the best ideas about education. It's also about what does it mean to learn? What does knowledge mean to you? How do you carry yourself on a day-to-day? It's very introspective as well. Your ideas do not exist in some silo that has no connection to who you are. They both are very deeply interconnected. And to understand your ideas, one must understand you. And for you to understand your own ideas, you have to understand yourself. And so I think in this way, this interconnection that shows up in these conferences are so unique and powerful. And it's, to me, what makes all these challenges and everything worth it. Because I think the first 2 days, I had a really hard time at Kaleido. But by the third or fourth day, the final day, I don't know, those challenges became very clear to me of why I feel them. What are some of the patterns that have been continuing for so long that allow those to exist? And what can I do moving forward? So in regards to this season 7, which I'm fascinated that we're at 7, we're about to hit episode 100 very soon. My intention is to shine light on all the different perspectives that I was able to hear over the span of the 5 days. There were a lot of people who do fascinating things, and while they may not all directly connect to education, what I want to highlight is that there are so many different perspectives to understanding what education is in its broadest sense. What is knowledge? What does it mean to learn? How do we learn? That it cannot just be with academics. It can't just, I'm really realizing now that it has to be with everyone. The ideal Reeducated podcast would be a simultaneous interview with 8 billion people at the same time to understand their experience of education, because it is something that everyone has a perspective on, and each person's perspective is equally as important. That's the most important part. Every child, every adult, every person who's grown up in different parts of the world, their perspective on what is education, what does it mean to them, why is it important, how has it affected them, is so important because it will be reflective of their experiences. There is no one solution that fits all for any of these problems. It has to be deeply context-oriented. And so in that sense, I'm excited this season to talk to artists, to talk to, theorists, to talk to academics, to also talk to people who are in the field, who do social work, all types of people, to bring awareness and to have these conversations with such a broader group of people than I think I have been so far. But, I think the best thing I can say is I would highly recommend anyone who has the time and the resources to attend something like this to do it at least once. I will share the resources for the next year, which should be around the same time. I will 100% be attending. But, I would love, if anyone wants to join me, please send me a message or an email. My email is gy118@georgetown.edu. But we could definitely go together, figure out travel plans, whatever it is that you need. But I would highly recommend it. This is the biggest stamp of approval I can possibly give, a 45-minute conversation. But yeah, there definitely is a lot of things I missed out on. The runs that I ran through the village, it was so beautiful. The waterfalls, I took a class on sustainability and on there's a permaculture, and that was amazing. I'm really excited to interview the teacher from that. But overall, it was a phenomenal experience, and I would highly recommend to anyone who's looking for just something a little bit more eclectic and maybe just furthers their horizons and their boundaries a little more. But I want to thank you all for listening. I would be shocked if someone made it 45 minutes without turning this off. I mean, that's fascinating to me, but thank you so much. It means a lot to me that maybe I do have something important to say. But yeah, I want to just say thank you so much for listening. I'm really excited for season 7. It's been such an amazing journey, and I love the new podcast cover that we came out with. There's a website on the way, which will be really helpful. And then I'm excited to also start a Patreon. So if you're looking to support, that would be amazing. And I will have that link out soon. But thank you so much for listening. And as per usual, stay re-educated. And that brings us to the end of our conversation. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you again for listening and making this process so much more enjoyable. If you haven't had the chance to already, make sure to subscribe to the podcast on Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts to get the latest updates on new episodes. If you've been learning useful information here, feel free to leave a review as well. A little bit goes a long way in spreading this podcast. And have a wonderful day. And as per usual, stay re-educated.